So I've been involved in the tech industry for a while. I finally got my foot in the door at my dream company that I've always wanted to be at. However, I did not expect to have to be paired with one of the most obnoxious jerks that I've ever seen on this planet. Well, you know what? Things have a way of coming back around for ya, Bradley, because guess what? I'm not only going to one day take over this company, I'm going to make sure you get fired. I want to start this off by saying that I'm not looking for legal advice. I've already consulted my legal team, and I know without any uncertainty that any decision I can make in this situation is entirely legal. That's not what I'm posting this for. What I need is some feedback on the morality of the situation at hand. Having dealt with my fair share of unsavory individuals throughout my career, I never want to become one of them without realizing it. So, anyways, I'm 32 and male. I've been working in the tech industry, and since, before I graduated college, I was fortunate enough to have basically always known what I wanted to do. Some people feel a pull towards the art. Some people feel they're gifted athletes, and I was a grade A nerd from day one, guys. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was going to do and where I was going to do it. Growing up in a relatively big city, there wasn't really a shortage of tech companies around me. However, the one that captured my attention and kept it was a local company that often had a booth at my school's career fair. It was probably 7 the first time I spoke to a representative of the company, which we'll call light work for the purpose of this post. I'd tagged along the career fair with my older sister and spent the rest of the afternoon hovering around Lightwork's booth. The representative must have noticed me orbiting their station and decided to give me a rundown on what they did. I was in love immediately, and that love never faded. I managed to snag an internship, and then during my senior year, and then again in college, which let me work with a couple of different departments and get a good feel for the company of the field as a whole. After graduation, I applied to one place and one place only. Stupid, I know. But it worked out in the end, and I know loyalty to a company has fallen out of fashion in recent years, and I don't blame the people who feel that way, but I knew from the moment I stepped foot in the building that it was my dream job. Not a lot of people get to work their dream job as a fresh graduate, so you can imagine how stoked I was from the absolute get-go. The first few years, it was amazing. I got along great with my team and supervisors, and I managed to snag a couple of promotions owing to the inherent work ethic of a lifeless nerd. And you know what? I absolutely loved what I do. Then I was promoted to a different team. I'd initially been quite nervous about it to begin, joining the team because I knew it was the most productive team in the entire department. They got everything done quickly and perfectly, and I'd hear from a couple of other coworkers that the team lead was a bit of a hard butt. So I was sure that he'd be cracking down on me as the newest member and just make sure that I did not slow them down. He was a few years older than me, and unlike me, he's been working with Lightwork since he's graduated. Unfortunately, that's where the similarities ended. I was right about him cracking down on me, but I had not expected him to be borderline useless as an employee. Where I and everyone else on the team loved what we were doing and were genuinely actually passionate about it, he did not seem to actually care about, anything. I learned very quickly that the only reason that the team was as productive as it was due to the other members. Everyone else on the team was absolutely killing it, and the team lead, Bradley, would take credit for it all. I was then informed that Bradley was the son of a good friend of one of the board members. He'd spent his entire tenure with Lightwork, guys. And, taking credit for the work of a team better than him and leveraging that to climb the ladder, he was virtually unfireable, if you ask me. Considering the nepotism that had gotten him the position in the first thing, and he loved to flaunt the fact of it. So I just really loved being at Lightwork and working. But the longer I spent on Bradley's team, the more I dreaded heading to work each and every day. I don't know, for some reason, he just seemed to have it out for me. In particular, when I joined the team, this isn't to say he was remotely nice to the other members of the team. He was especially brutal to our intern, but he definitely had issues with me in particular. My other coworkers and I were never able to figure out what his deal with me was. But the longer it went on, the more it grated me. I loved my job, but I hated working with Bradley. Ugh. Well, this was around the time my wife started encouraging me to look beyond light work. She knew how much I loved the place, but she believed that I was capable of more than just being a cog in some machine. It turns out she was right. After a lot of deliberation, I decided to leave light work to start my own company with a friend of mine from college. He handled the communication side of everything, and I was in charge of technology. To make a long story short, we ended up doing amazing. We weren't a household name or anything like that, but our product was very much in demand in the industry. Guys, I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into my company, which we'll refer to as Resolve Corp for this post, and it really paid off. A few years after founding it, we received a buyout offer that was just too good to decline. Well, guys, that brings us to the present. I've sold Resolve Corp. My co-founder and I split the money according to our ownership percentage, and now I'm just twiddling my thumbs deciding what exactly I should do. I've done luxury vacations with my family, and I've even settled down into a very nice neighborhood, guys. But I'm not quite ready to call it quits on my career and dedicate my days to gardening just yet. It was my son that suggested my next move, flippantly in that way only a child can achieve. He cut into a conversation I was having with my wife about how much I love working in the field and how I found myself missing my days at Lightwork. He said that if I loved Lightwork so much, why don't I just buy it? My wife and I laughed at the idea. Well, then that night his words started tickling my brain. What if I bought Lightwork? Over the next few weeks, my son's innocent suggestion turned into a serious consideration of mine, guys. It started actually looking into a possibility of purchasing my dream company. So I went ahead to contact a few people that I know and ran the idea by some friends in the industry. It started to become more considerable. It was an actual tangible option. The reason I'm writing this is because despite having fun this idea by my fair share of people, I don't know if it's just a bit weird. I understand the legality of the situation, and I understand how much it'll cost, and the steps I'll have to take to make it happen, but I don't know if this is a normal thing to do. Will I come across as spiteful? I love Lightwork, and I would hate for anyone to think that I'm only interested in them because I left and now want them under my thumb. I really have no idea what kind of advice or reassurance I'm looking for here, but anything would be appreciated. It's a weird thing to do, isn't it? I've decided to go ahead with the purchasing of Lightwork. Seeing as it's been a while since my first post, we're actually a good way into the process already. Having just recently gone through this on the side of the company, being bought out, being the buyer is an interesting experience. I was never particularly involved with the higher-ups at Lightwork when I worked there, so there are a lot of new faces who are vaguely familiar and who are vaguely familiar with my work with them. The main owner seems relieved that I genuinely care about the company, which I think was a large reason that he even was willing to sell. I know a lot of people were wondering why I was so unsure about purchasing the company, and really there was nothing more to it than a bit of social awkwardness. I thought it would be weird to see my past colleagues as their boss, but a little run-in I had earlier today changed my mind on the matter. Basically, my legal team and I were at Lightwork building to meet with a couple of the higher-ups, just to get over on some aspects of the buyout. After everything was handled and my legal team left, I stuck around to chat with one of the higher-ups who was curious about my previous experience working at Lightwork. It was a good conversation, but nothing relevant enough of the story. I mention it just to say that I was in the building for a little bit longer by myself, shortly after I was going to head out. I took the elevator down, and it happened to pick up another passenger on the way. Guess who? Bradley. I hadn't seen him or interacted with him in a way since I left Lightwork a few years ago, so it was definitely shocking for the two of us. I figured that I would run into him at some point, but I wasn't really expecting today. Clearly he wasn't either, but he recovered faster than I did. He asked what I was doing here, and not wanting to reveal too much too soon, I just said I was dropping off some stuff that I hadn't realized I had with me. He just laughed and told me that I should just admit that I was back here to grovel for a job. I was speechless for a moment, and before I could think of anything smart to say back, we arrived on the first floor. Instead of dignifying him with a response, I decided to just leave. After all, actions speak louder than words, and I can't think of anything better than watching his face when I'm introduced as his new boss soon. I initially was just going to avoid him, which would not be very hard until I was officially his boss. But a lot of suggestions I've received have made me look at the situation in a more creative light. Almost everybody who had something to say about my last run-in with him thinks that I should mess with him a little. Let him dig his own grave a little more so that it's much more satisfying when the truth is revealed. Now, I was raised to be a good man. Integrity, honesty, all the above, and the values my parents instilled in me told me to leave the situation as it is and not bother with him at all. However, given the fact that he went out of his way to make rude assumptions after not having seen me for years, I think I can excuse a little bit of mischief. I resolved that if I saw him again, I'd let myself indulge a little mess with him. I would not go out of my way to look for him, but he came to me and I would not turn away. Well, come to me he did. In a very similar situation to our previous run-in, I bumped into old Bradley on my way out of the elevator in the main lobby. I think he was on his way back from lunch while I was on my way out to a meeting with the board. I didn't even have to say anything for him to ask how my groveling was going. I asked what he meant, and he said that I was clearly trying to get my old position back. He then asked me if my startup failed, knowing that this was my chance to mess with him. I feigned my best downtrodden look and nodded, letting him know that it went under. Instead of seeming remorseful or sympathetic like any normal person would be at the news, Bradley looked downright gleeful. He told me that he always knew I wasn't made for leadership and that any venture started by me or anyone on our old team for the matter was bound to fail. The only reason our team had been as productive as it was because of his steadfast leadership. Honestly, I think I should get an award for keeping a straight face throughout his little speech. As much as I wanted to continue our pleasant little conversation, though, I really did have to go. So once he was done with his monologue, I asked him to put in a good word for me jokingly and said my goodbyes. He assured me that he'd definitely be putting in a good word, given the fact that our old intern Nadia just texted me saying that Bradley's been bragging about sabotaging my chances at light work. I can tell that the next few weeks are going to be entertaining for sure. I replied to my ex-intern Nadia's text message. I kept in touch with my old team and here and there, and so I knew that Nadia's been hired for a full-time position with another team sometime after I left. She had a few others from our old team, having them stay with Lightworks since, and have actually been doing quite well. Nadia, in particular, has been flourishing with her current team. Anyways, she told me that Bradley had approached her and another old teammate of ours in the break room to brag about how he'd spoken to HR about making sure I was never hired to work at Lightwork ever again. Nadia asked him why he would do that, given the fact that she knew I was doing quite well and would not need to get a position at Lightwork. Bradley told her that he'd seen me, quote, sulking around the office lately and had told them that Resolve Corp had gone under. Nadia, who knew that was not the case but also did not like Bradley enough to clear up any misconception he had, just listened. Bless her heart. She got so much out of him, and he told her how he knew I'd never amount to anything, how he would make sure that I'd never work in the industry again, and how he would be waiting for the chance to do this ever since I left. Given all this, Nadia was understandably curious about what was going on. After swearing her to secrecy, I decided to let her in on all of it, knowing that she would not rat me out. She, like many of you, found it absolutely hilarious. She said that she would keep my secret, but in return she wanted to be around when Bradley found out, and I was going to be his boss so she could see the look on his face. Obviously, I agreed and promised her a front row seat to the destruction of Bradley's ego. However, since that conversation, I've been thinking over what Bradley did. He went out of his way to speak to HR in order to sway them against hiring me? While we all know that nothing he's doing will actually have any consequence for me, had I actually been in a position to need a job at Lightwork, his actions could have been extremely detrimental. As far as he was concerned, he was sabotaging my career with no remorse for the fact that my young family and I would be left without a source of income. I decided that simply messing with him was not enough anymore. I called up a few of the members of the board that I'd become more comfortable with over the buyout process and set up a meeting outside of the office, just making sure that Bradley would not be able to catch wind of it. Nadia offered to see if she could get Bradley to talk more about what he had done in front of witnesses, and I, of course, accepted. There were only a few more details that I need to iron out before the buyout is going to be announced, and I can't wait to see again what Bradley thinks about it. As entertaining as it would be to have multiple witnesses to his downfall, I don't want to start off my time here at the helm of Lightwork on that note. Instead, I opted to keep it a little more private. Nadia and a couple of my other ex-teammates organized a reunion dinner for our original team. Obviously, both Bradley and I were invited, and unbeknownst to him, this was all a ploy to get him alone with us. I arrived at the dinner a little after Bradley, and upon laying his eyes on me, his smug little smirk returned. He made a big deal about welcoming me to the dinner, and an ex-teammate said how good it was to see me given how busy I've been lately, and Bradley replied by saying that I was going to have a lot more free time from now on. So, Nadia asked him what he meant, and with a gloating smirk he announced to everyone that Resolve Corp had gone under. Well, everyone else obviously was shocked, but before they could express their sympathies, I cut in to correct him, saying something along the lines of, "Oh, is that so? Is that what I said? Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Resolve was bought. It's not under, I just sold it." I went on to say that he was right about everyone seeing me more often, though, because my first action was buying out Lightwork. Guys, if you could have seen the look upon his face, it was priceless. And it took everything in me not to laugh to his face right then and there. Instead, I explained that I've been in talks with the board for the last few months about the buyout, which I was able to afford thanks to the lucrative buyout of my own company. I said that everything was finally settled enough for me to announce the news and that I wanted my old team to be there to, the first to know, which is why I had asked Nadia to organize the dinner. While everyone else at the table took turns congratulating me and making jokes about me being their new boss, Bradley sputtered through a few responses before finally just accusing me of being a liar. So I invited him to ask his contacts on the board. Though no one else was authorized to announce anything in an official capacity for a couple more days, he did whip out his phone, though, and called right up the board member who had gotten him his job to begin with, only to find out that everything I was saying, 100% true. He raged about me making a fool out of him the times that we bumped into each other, and though I easily just responded that he made a fool out of himself without my help. To cap off a very amusing night, as he gathered his things to storm off from the table that had turned into a celebratory dinner for my accusation of the company, I stopped him to let him know that I wanted to meet him on the first day in the office a couple weeks from now. I told him that my assistant would be in touch. I still have a little more planned for him, given what he had tried to do for my career, but the highlight of all this will probably remain the look on his face when I told him that I was buying out Lightwork. With that, the Chronicles of Bradley, as my wife has been referring it to, comes to a close. I hope this ending was satisfying as it was for me. I know I said I was done with this, but yet here I am. I still get messages about this post occasionally, and particularly are curious about what prompted me to write this final update. A few people were wondering what I wanted to do when I met Bradley, so I figured I'd let you know. On my first day at the helm of Lightwork, I called Bradley to the office to let him know I expected his resignation on my desk by the end of the day, and he can go ahead and move his crap out to a different department. Well, he was confused as you probably are, so let me explain. After I found out what Bradley had tried to do to my career, I decided that simply messing with him was not adequate. He deserved to actually face the consequences of his actions, and long story short, after meeting with some board members about some restructuring and getting the HR staff that he spoke to go on record about what he had said, I presented Bradley with two choices. Firstly, He could leave the company peacefully. Secondly, he could remain within the company at a much lower position. He was outraged, obviously, and asked what right I had to do such a thing. At that point, I presented multiple documents. Firstly, his attempt to, march my name through the mud with HR. Secondly, his productivity report as a team lead. And finally, a signed testimonial from every member of his team stating that he did not carry his weight. Guys, to summarize, what I'm sure was a very unfortunate moment for him, he chose to take the demotion. Yup, he's still here. He now works on a different team, not a lead, and is actually expected to do his own work. Of course, if he fails to perform, he'll be terminated. His salary decreased significantly, and given the fact that his contact on the board decided to retire after my accusation, he can't really go running to anyone. In other news, Nadia's been promoted to take Bradley's previous spot. She's doing great. All in all, I'm really happy with how it all turned out. Almost everyone is, with the exception of old dear Brad. The end for real this time.